Join us on a journey where we unravel the latest trends, tackle your burning questions, and explore innovative strategies that are shaping the future of compensation, all with a cup of coffee in hand. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new year of Comp and Coffee. So firstly, Happy New Year to you all. Very pleased that you've decided to come back and join us. We're obviously at that time of the year where we think about what happened last year in 2025, and we start to think about what we might do differently in 2026. And that's really very much what this podcast is about today. We've assembled some of the leaders here from PayScale, and we're going to be thinking about some of the changes that happened in 2025 and some of the good things we want to take forward into 2026. There was a lot of challenges and a lot of change in 2025. We know today that as HR and compensation leaders, you're navigating a rapidly changing landscape, and that the past year brought reflection, strategic realignment, undoubtedly a relentless focus on productivity and value creation. Not to mention technical transformation driven by increased adoption of AI impacting the work that you did, but also the work that your organizations do. So in this episode, we're going to consider what's in and what's out for HR and compensation in 2026. And I have not one, not two, not three, but four guests joining me today. So I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves and tell me why they're excited to join me today to discuss our 2026 predictions. So let's introduce you. Pei, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience? Welcome back to the podcast.
All right. Thank you, Ruth. So my name is Pei. I'm the Chief Product Officer at PayScale. I think the thing that is getting me super excited to be back here is there's never in a point in time that in history that technology has been moving so fast in the history of technology itself. So this is super exciting with all the opportunities that is in front of us and how we actually capitalize on it and how that actually shape the next phase of how compensation, HR, and technology itself is going to turn out to be. So that is super exciting to me.
Great. Thank you, Pei. And Lexi, welcome back to the podcast too.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I'm Lexi, the Chief People Officer at PayScale. I've been at PayScale 5.5 years now and just always excited to join this podcast with very smart people that I love working with every single day. Why am I the most excited? Outside of I'm a big reflections gal and as we plan for the new year. So excited to dig into a little bit of reflection on 25, but how that might change the landscape as we look ahead in 26. To what Pei mentioned, I think things are moving faster than ever. And so it is my favorite thing every single year at PayScale to look back at what Ruth and I said may happen a year before and see if it actually did. So we'll maybe find a little bit of that as we go along the conversation today too.
But we can't say we're always right then, Lexi, maybe.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I could, but I don't lie.
That's what I like to tell my husband mainly most of the time. But anyway, Sarah, welcome back to the podcast.
Glad to be here. I'm Sarah. I'm the VP of AI and Data Science here at PayScale. And I'm really excited to have this conversation because not only is technology changing really quickly and that meaning that the work that our comp pros are doing every day is changing, AI is really upending the labor market in all of these interesting ways. And so I'm excited to talk with this group about what we expect to happen in 2026 and both the labor market side and in the with the tools and technology that help you do your job side.
Thank you, Sarah. And last but not least, Lulu, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, everyone. I am Lulu Cycli. I'm Senior Corporate Employment Counsel here at PayScale. And right before this podcast started, Sarah Hillenmeyer wished me happy anniversary because Sarah and I started at PayScale like 2 days ago, 4 years ago, on the exact same day. That was a lot of math in one sentence, so apologies for that. But I am always so excited to join Ruth. And this is a stellar panel of folks that we have here for this podcast, kind of like the all-star podcast version for Comp and Coffee. But I'm excited because I think 2025 was kind of the turning point from a legal perspective that really showed organizations that things like pay equity and pay transparency compliance is no longer just like a nice to have thing. Like we are actually getting to the point of this is the law. This is what compliance looks like. Organizations, for the most part, don't really have a choice anymore. So I'm kind of excited to have turned that corner and be part of this great team to help organizations make sure that they're treating their employees and folks well, from recruiting to incumbent employees. So happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Lulu. And congratulations, Sarah and Lulu, on your 4th anniversary here at
Thanks.
PayScale. Okay, so let's look back before we think about 2026. Let's have a few reflections on 2025. It was definitely a year of strategic realignment for many organizations, and we know that many people were recalibrating their pay practices in line with labor market and, as Lulu mentioned, legislative developments. Some will say that the balance of power shifted and it became an employer's market. I don't wholly agree with that because I think employee expectations remain elevated. The balance of power did shift somewhat in some sectors for some folks. Pay mentioned this. HR tech finally had its AI breakthrough as vendors started to focus on how the work of HR and compensation will shift in a world powered by data and AI. So I'd like to start to consider what lessons from 2025 matter most for 26. So Lexi, we're going to start with you. What were the biggest shifts in HR strategy and compensation that you saw in 2025?
I think what's interesting is like as we look, if I look all the way back to the beginning of 2025, I think there was a lot of uncertainty around both the market, but also specifically what it might mean for compensation. I think, with any kind of new administration, the first question is like, what's going to happen to all that pay transparency legislation? I'm sure Lulu will talk about that as we get deeper into it. But I think what was interesting for me, to your point on, is it an employer's market heading into 26 or not, or did that shift happen? Maybe that shift happened a little bit in as we look at 2025, but I think to your point, Ruth, employee expectations did not go away. So use pay transparency as an example. I think I've said this before, cats out of the bag, can of worms. I'm not good with analogies, but I think it's already happened and employees and candidates and everyone out there has already seen the beginning of ranges. And so even with changes in the macro environment, and even with the swing a little bit more towards the employers, those expectations have stayed high. And I think you see that reflected in headlines, reflected in activity on social, anything around the workplace feels like it has that kind of thematic undertone. And I think that was a real continued shift. Transparency, I think, can be really good, but it also can be really scary in an environment where the macroeconomic environment is changing. The makeup of organizations are changing. And in 25, we had to see a lot of organizations make really tough decisions around their workforces. And I think what has been the most interesting to me is like, going back the last couple of years, and I've talked about this before, like the biggest thing I think employees have asked for and have asked for, especially in the last year, is some version of like authenticity from their employer. And that's reflected in things like pay transparency, but it's also reflected in things like, hey, we're going to ask you to go back to work because of the culture. And they're like, it's not the culture. You signed a real estate lease. Like, why can't you just tell us that that's the truth? And we got to maximize that spend. So I think that there's like a theme of authenticity. I think there's also a theme within HR around data, around the evolution of technology, around AI, around all these things that I'm sure we'll get into as we flip to thinking about 2026. But I think that it was interesting seeing all of those things collide in 25 because I think it put the pressure on comp and HR teams to go, okay, what's hype and what's real? What do I actually have to listen to? What do I not? And how do I make sure that I can help my organization go through any of these kind of ups and downs or cooling and keep my employees feeling really engaged or like we're still being authentic in the story that we're telling. There's all kinds of other, I think, things that were a theme as we, look at last year, but I think that is a very tricky balance as it comes to actually, maintaining, I think, engagement. And we did see, I think, engagement overall, dip down. And so I just think all of those things are fascinating. They paint a fascinating landscape for like what will happen in 26 to continue along those lines or provide clarity on anything that we found out as we went through last year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in theory, it should have been an easier year for an employer, but it definitely didn't feel like that for many organizations, I don't think. And that kind of continuing friction. Interesting to see if we think that's going to carry on through 2026. So, Pay, looking back at 2025, how did AI and compensation technology influence decisions last year, do you think?
This last year, I would say, is one of the year that you kind of see a significant change. Like when I got here, the beginning of the year, when we kind of when I talk to our customers and talk to people who is using the compensation software, there is a lot of skepticism about, hey, how is AI going to be leveraged in the space that we have? Fast forward 3 months, it become like, hey, what AI do you have? And then 3 months later, in the mid-year, people are starting to ask, give me your AI roadmap. I want it now. I want everything. I want everything that you can offer. It's never in the history that we have seen that technologies show up and adoption has been ramping up so rapidly in a broad base. So if you kind of take a step back and look at it, it is a year of massive change. It is the change is the constant in this context where people are expecting change, embracing it, and is actually looking forward to it. And that has not typically been the case. People are normally change adverse, and that is what is driving a lot of the adoption and opening minds in terms of how we do things differently in compensation and opening up more opportunities for us to evolve and innovate across the board. I see this accelerating and also continues to morph and remorph our assumption, our thinking into 2026. And last year is just an indication that this will continue. And it's not just compensation. It will change workforce. It will change job. It will change everything that touches every part of our life that we know it will get evolved. And people are starting to embrace it, which is really, really good to see.
Yeah, I mean, the pace was just amazing, like the difference, even if we think about our roadmap here at PayScale from where we started at the beginning of the year to where we are 12 months later. I don't think any of us would have envisaged, what the exciting stuff that we're going to be bringing to market this year, 12 months ago. And that I don't think I've ever known in my 14 years of being in HR tech, it evolve at that pace before.
That's interesting. I'll just jump on there. I think one of the things that surprised me so much is that the maturity of the buyers evaluating AI technology grew really quickly too. So at the beginning of the year, there was this hesitancy of like, oh, I don't know what that is. I'm a little bit scared. By the middle of the year, they were like, just give me the AI. I want the AI. Do you have AI? And it was almost a check the box kind of decision of it has AI or it doesn't have AI. And we saw vendors marketing HR tech as being AI powered and, AI this and AI that. But by the end of the year, the buyers that we were talking to and some from our surveys as well were indicating that they don't just want AI. They want to make sure that the AI solves the very specific problems that are challenging them. And so they were getting a little bit more nuanced in their evaluation of these tools. And we didn't see as much AI marketing just for the sake of having AI.
Yeah, I think definitely it converted from hype into reality. Tell me, how you are going to help me solve my problems. Tell me how you're going to help me do the work that I should be doing in the future, and wanting to have that level of understanding for sure. And Lulu, from your perspective or from your lens, which lessons from 2025 do you think are worth carrying into the new year?
I think education's a huge piece. And I know here at PayScale, we try doing that very collaboratively with our customers. I've been on so many customer calls, particularly around the EU Pay Transparency Directive. And it's been really amazing to hear how educated our customers are about some of those requirements. And I think a lot of that has to do with our enablement and our providing that information to those customers and helping them get prepared for these big kind of compliance issues that are coming down the pipeline. So while we are still kind of, obviously collaborating and partnering with these customers, they're also coming to the table with really great questions because they're now understanding, on the pay transparency and pay reporting side, they are talking the same lingo that we're speaking because it's been such a common thing that's been happening here on the US side that they're already kind of up to speed speaking that language when it comes to the EU side. So that's been really nice from my perspective. So I hope we carry that through this year.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about what we think is going to be what we think is going to be out in 2026. I think we talked about pace. I think HR and compensation leaders are really going to have to focus on what works and what they want to leave behind. They are going to have to do that at pace. I think pay transparency, fairness, skills-based talent management, real-time data-driven decision-making are my bets on what's going to be in. Manual processes, non-defensible pay practices, and siloed decision making are on my out list for 2026. Sarah, what about you? How is AI being used effectively in compensation, and what approaches do you think are going to be left behind?
Yeah, I think the thing that we'll see as table stakes in 2026 is job matching and managing your catalogs of jobs. I think AI is a great fit there, and lots of vendors, including us, have good solutions there that will just get better over time. The part where I think we'll see, I don't think it's out, but I think there's a lot of untapped potential, and I'm not seeing as many early signals as I want to see going into 2026. Is really helping with that data integration problem between your HRIS system and your payroll system and your compensation management. I think that's still hard for folks, and so it's a dream that maybe AI starts to solve some of those problems and make that smoother, but it feels like a big barrier right now to get those systems integrated.
Do you think we'll solve that in 26, Pay, generally?
Uh, I think we will start getting some headway into it. I think with AI being much forefront, the adoption will start with the stuff that is known, leveraging AI, solving a lot of the known workflow, making much more efficient. Then once that is mostly solved, people will start to expect more. And expectation will shift to give me something strategic, tell me more that I do not know of so that I can make better decisions, right? That asking for more will require more data to be integrated across different sources so they can make a much better informed and cohesive decisions. And that will be the beginning to that road around it to basically accelerate this pace of integration of data, better decision, better informed decision by integrating all this data, turning compensation management to basically compensation intelligence to make better decision. I think the other point at the point that you make, Ruth, is the data and AI accelerate the part where if the process or methods is actually not defensible will become a problem. It's as easy as anyone can go into ChatGPT or any of your favorite AI tool and say how much someone should be paid, and you'll get an answer. Now the burden is on the HR team, professionals, and everyone to kind of say, well, that data might not be accurate, might not be correct. And this is the methodology using trusted, informed data that we come up with to kind of decide what it should be the right information to basically share with our employees. So that will become much, much more problem. And it's being accelerated by making it easy to get the answer, but you might not always get the right answer. And getting the right answer with defensible methodology will become front and center as well as part of this process as a side effect of AI acceleration and everywhere.
And that's going to be even more important when the direct EU pay transparency directive gets passed is documentation, making sure you have your ducks in a row, you have reliable data sources that you can point to say, I didn't just throw a dart at the dartboard to come up with this random pay range for this employee because I really want them to come here. But yeah, that's an amazing point, Pay.
Mm. And Lulu, while we've got you there, when it comes to pay transparency, what do you think will be in or out this year?
Well, what's definitely out is not posting ranges at all, or posting wide ranges to where it's like not even worth your time posting the range because there's no way a candidate can understand what the actual salary range that employer is hiring at. I think another thing that's out is treating pay transparency as only a recruitment process. Pay transparency, to get compliant with pay transparency laws, takes, I've been saying this phrase all day long, and it's such a cheesy phrase, and I apologize out there, but cross-functional collaboration is key for this. You have to talk to your HR teams. You have to talk to your comp teams. You have to talk to legal. You have to talk to finance. There are so many other people aside from the recruiting function that have to get involved before that salary range gets posted. Another thing I think is going to be out is organizations assuming that if you're posting a remote role that no state law applies. So if you're saying like, oh, this is a remote role, I don't have to comply with California because I'm probably going to hire in Oklahoma. That's not how the laws work. And if you've been on any webinars with Ruth and me, we have beat this question to death as to what that remote requirement looks like. And then not doing pay equity analyses. I know there was a lot of confusion at the beginning of this year when the new administration came in and was starting to put together some executive orders about, what do those executive orders mean for pay equity analyses? At the end of the day, paying folks fairly and equally is the law, and that is not going to change. It is federal law, period, the end. So the organizations that really win here are not the ones who are just doing the bare minimum. They're the ones using these pay transparency laws as a forcing function to clean up their comp strategy, to clean up their data. And by cleaning up data, I not only mean internally, but like using validated outsourced data to make sure that the ranges that they're hiring folks at are really kind of in line with market. And then what I think is going to be in are these good faith pay ranges. California, for those of y'all who remember, was like the second or third state to pass this pay transparency type of law requiring folks to post ranges and job postings. Well, they just came out as of January 1 with some clarifying legislation saying, and they've adopted kind of this good faith pay range language that a lot of other states that followed it have adopted. So, what does a good faith pay range mean? Well, it means that that organization is going to hire somewhere in good faith in that pay range. They're not just posting a random range and seeing what candidates come in. And then back to Pay's point earlier, documented methodology and for how ranges are set, how they're updated, et cetera, is going to be really, really important because I think what's happening now is that regulators and then even plaintiffs who are going to file lawsuits against organizations, they're less focused about whether you're actually posting a range and they're more focused on what the range actually means. Meaning, are you posting a $500,000 spread in your range? Where did you get that data from? How did you come to that salary range? Is it geographically agnostic, et cetera? And then I think something else that's going to also be in is consistency between job architecture and posting, and then audit trails and documentation. Please, please, please make sure your legal teams will thank you for documenting all these decisions that you make. And I know Pay and Sarah in the product have been doing an amazing job of making sure our customers can do that internally.
And you mentioned California. We were talking about this earlier today, Lulu. The other change that they've just brought in is extending the definition of pay to include all types of pay. Do you want to just tell us a bit about that?
So, and Ruth and I will talk about this in further detail in an upcoming webinar, but just a little extra plug here. But in addition, California has come out to say that when we're running pay equity checks and we're really evaluating the differences in pay amongst people doing the same amount of work, in California, you're no longer just looking at base salary ranges. You are looking at equity. You're looking at even vacation allotment. You are looking at other types of monetary benefits, how much the employer is contributing to your 401k or how much they're contributing to your healthcare premiums. So these are other things, and this is kind of a copy paste job from what's happening in Europe. So if you've got a European population and you're already kind of up to speed on that, this total compensation idea in terms of evaluating folks for pay equity purposes is now I think it's going to be the new frontier in terms of what we're going to see. I imagine Washington, Massachusetts, New York, they're all going to follow in legislation. I wouldn't be surprised if they do that in the next couple of weeks of 2026.
Yeah, so I think we'll see more changes coming on the legislative front that we're going to be able to pay close attention to. Well, I think one thing that I was pleased to see happen in 2025 was the shift in conversation from pay being seen as a cost to pay being seen as an investment. And organizations really starting to think about how compensation could be used as a strategic lever in organizations. And more people were asking how the dollars that they were investing in people could help move the needle on value creation. And I think very much we're shifting from like not only knowing what to pay, but how to pay smarter. Now, Lexi, we spoke on an earlier podcast this year about the importance of the CFO, CHRO or CPO relationship, and that it was no longer an optional relationship. It's really becoming central to linking people investment with business outcomes. So do you want to comment about that, Lexi? Like, how do you see that evolving a bit more this year?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is on my like out and in list is one of the things that is out is manual processes, spreadsheets, and avoiding the investment in HR tech and AI. Out. It's out. One of the things that I think is in is embracing proactive AI and HR tech usage, inclusive of HR and comp, spending time in conversations where the time really matters. And what I mean by that is conversations with people like your finance team or your CFO to be seen as core operators of the business. And I think like, when we had that podcast, and I think that was Ruth and then that was Philip, our CFO, one of the things we talked about is how, especially as we get into planning season and like we're just starting to come out of some of planning season before we get formal budget approval internally at PayScale, the the tightness of that relationship, and you don't always have to agree, but you have to be able to speak the same language. And one of the things that we talked a lot about is how Philip from a CFO flexes to my style or I flex to his style to be able to make sure that we're saying the same things. And there's a lot of within that conversation where he'll go, can I repeat back to you what I think I'm hearing? And I'll do the same thing back to him to make sure that we're definition wise talking about and aligned on the same concepts as we make those big decisions. I think that relationship is more important than ever, not just because I think, you everywhere within HR and comp with the driver of AI and tech, we're hearing about more of those roles becoming core operators. The only way that you do that is by speaking similar language to roles like the CFO. And when I say that, I think about the world of compensation, which, we talk about all the time, is one of, if not the biggest investment that a company will make. And the actual dollars and data that is associated with planning the budget, making sure everyone is paid fairly, understanding what merit looks like, using data to guide the decisions, and making sure that your dollars and your investments are in the places where you need to invest as you think about what business goals you're going to hit in the upcoming year. And so the only way that I think that, HR and comp really elevate outside of, the conversations that don't matter as much to the conversations that actually strategically impact the performance of the business is like use things like compensation as your core data or your core metrics to understand it better than ever. So that when you show up and have those conversations with your CFO or your finance person, you're speaking the same language as they are. And so I just think that is like core, especially as we go into another year where there's still uncertainty in what's ahead. That could be uncertainty around AI, that could be uncertainty around tech, that can be uncertainty around the market and like what's going to happen this year that may not have already happened in 2025. I think the best way to navigate that, if you're listening, is like build a tight relationship with your business leaders, but focus on finance and the CFO, because that's that partnership, I think, what do they say? Will set you free. I don't know. But I think it might set you free in a good way,
Now, something that we spend a lot of time talking about, Sarah, is skills. How do you see organizations evolving in how they manage roles and skills in 2026?
Yeah, as Lexi said, comp is a lever, and we're seeing that key roles where it's really important that you're hiring quickly and hiring the right people and retaining the right people are shifting dramatically with the advent of this new technology. So we're seeing things like even marketing managers that come in with an AI skill make quite a bit more money than a marketing manager that doesn't have that particular skill. So for those key roles that are really critical to the success of your business, what we're starting to see is organizations add in or shift to sometimes more real-time data sources so that they can keep a pulse on how to compensate for those emerging skills. The definition of the role is changing so fast that a year-old benchmark just isn't relevant anymore to what that job does and what the different skills are that are important for that person to be successful. So I see comp teams in 2026 spending even more time at least keeping an eye on those hot jobs or those roles where the definition is shifting really rapidly, not necessarily changing their pay bands. You got to be partners with your CFO. I get that, but paying attention and so that they're not surprised next year when it's like, wow, we're not matching correctly, or the pay for the job that we're matched to has jumped much more than we expected.
Yeah, so an increasing understanding of skills then, really. So,
Right.
and
Right.
and pay, if we think about the conversation of compensation as a strategic lever. How do you see compensation data solutions supporting this shift?
I think there's like two or three major things that data and the solution will kind of support a shift. I think the first component is in 2026, I think we talk about paying competitively, paying fairly, paying transparently, and across the board. But also with what is happening in the labor market and in the market in general, there is a lot more sensitivity to budget and how budget is being allocated. So I think there will be a little bit of more scrutiny about how are you going to distribute properly the limited amount of budget that you actually have. It's no longer just X, Y percentage across the board. It might be how do you smartly and optimize what you have to the right role, and compensation data and benchmarking will be a key component to basically decide how you distribute the budget that you have. It's not about expanding the budget, it's more about making use of the budget you have. That's one component. The second component is around what Sarah is talking about. The pace of change is so fast, so quick that jobs are actually forming and reforming. I think some of you might heard early last year, we are hearing folks try to hire prompt engineering. Then after that, in 2 months, that job is disappeared. And then after that, it become agent manager, and it just keep evolving too quickly. To that point, having data that doesn't get refreshed fast enough, you will not be able to capture that and understand what to pay competitively. So there is a shift with data where you will still need the foundational jobs and what that looks like as the foundation. You need to layer in real-time data to kind of inform you of how the key job that matters to your organization is shifting. How do you want to allocate the budget towards that? And then the third part is, because we are entering a phase of AI disruption and innovation, skills become the key nuances that you kind of adjust against what you can actually get from jobs, what you can get from roles, and skills that is evolving at a rapid pace. All the three things combined will evolve how data is being used, what type of data is being used, how do you benchmark, how often you benchmark, and how you merge them to figure out what is the right way to structure and plan the limited budget that you have and distribute it accordingly, fairly, and equitably for your entire workforce. That's how I see data and solution will have to come together to support that move.
Right. So I've learned a lot from you all today in terms of like what we think might happen in 2026. Also quite excited because a lot of the things that I've wanted to happen for a long time in the world of compensation sound like they're starting to happen. So, finally achieving potentially more data around paying for skills, really thinking about compensation as an investment, and seeing widespread adoption of transparency. So thank you for sharing all your thoughts today. But before we close out, I'd like to hear from each of you. What is one actionable tip for HR leaders that you would like to leave them with in terms of starting the year and getting ahead of the curve? Let's go round the table. Lulu, do you want to go first?
The one thing I would say is that's very easy for comp professionals to do, especially right now. They could do it today, is just kind of audit your pay ranges before you post them. So specifically making sure that any pay ranges you post is exactly what you're going to pay today. So align your job levels, have clear documentation rationale. And the fastest way to really get behind the curve is to publish ranges that don't match reality, because honestly, once they're public, every inconsistency becomes a question you have to answer either to your CFO, to your CEO, or in really bad cases to a judge in a court of law. Not to be dramatic or anything.
And potentially your candidates too, and your employees.
Yeah, your candidates too. Yeah.
And Sarah, what would be your actionable tip for the year?
So Lulu says audit your pay ranges. I say audit your jobs. Look for those critical roles where the expectations are shifting quickly or new skills seem to be driving pay. Make a list. Figure out a mechanism to keep a pulse on the market for those roles so that you're not completely surprised when the next cycle comes around or when you lose all of your key talent.
That's a good one. And Lexi, have you got one for the audience?
I do have one. It's kind of tied to my in and out. So here I am with a theme for today. I think start the year and inventory your HR tech stack and inventory where you're spending your time. And by where you're spending your time, I mean, go and like do a quick little time study. Don't spend a whole lot of time on it, but think about all the manual things that you're doing. Think about all the things that could be done in some kind of software, or think about the places that most annoy you within your week. Some of those could be solved by AI or an HR tech stack. Some of those things might exist anyway. So I can't solve everything for you. But I think do a quick inventory of where you're spending your time and where that time is really demonstrating value, or time where your HR tech stack or AI solutions or anything else could actually help you spend a little bit less time there. I think it's a good way to kick off the year.
Yeah, it's another good tip. Pay, you want to close us out? What's your tip?
One thing, given that it's related to the pace of change as well, given the rate of pace of change, I think one of the key tip is you should dust up your job description for your employees. The last time that you have updated it is probably no longer accurate, and based on the change that is happening, and everything that you do on compensation intelligence benchmarking start from there. Anyway, so dust it up, get it up to date, and try to find a way through software that you're using to keep it as up to date as possible, so that you can actually benchmark accurately, correctly, and the intelligence that is going to be surfaced up from it is relevant because you have the right data going in.
Great. I think my tip would be just be curious. I think the pace of change is going to be rapid. We've already discussed that this year. Embrace the change, embrace the benefits that the changes that are coming will be able to help you, and be curious about it. I think that would be my tip. So thank you all for joining me. I think 2026 is going to shape up to be a real year of acceleration and transformation for HR and compensation. And for the Comp and Coffee audience, stay with us throughout the year if you want to learn more about these emerging trends. And if you want to be part of the conversation, then do get in touch with us here at coffee@payscale.com if you want to join in the conversation. And if you want to dig deeper or check out any of the episode resources, or read our 2025 year end of report along with our predictions for HR in 2026, then they're all contained in the show notes. And I think my last teaser is that our compensation best practice report, our big annual study on what's going on in the world of compensation, is due to be released in mid-February. And thank you for all of you that took part in that. We'll be talking about that on Comp and Coffee too, but keep an eye out for that. So thank you all to my guests today, Lexi, Pei, Lulu, Sarah. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to having you back on the podcast in 2026. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining today.